The COVID-19 pandemic made online learning and virtual classrooms become increasingly popular, proving to many educational institutions, parents, and even students how much technology can enhance the learning process. Although EdTech, that is education technology, is nothing new, the concept has fast become a buzzword as various schools and educators latch onto e-learning platforms to help students have a more comprehensive learning process. Despite technological challenges faced, different ideas and digital platforms have popped up to help bridge the education gap and are changing the narrative in the EdTech space. We discuss with Rebecca Strohmeyer, a founder of eLearning Africa, to see how we can leverage e-learning to strengthen our education processes.
Hello, Rebecca. Glad to have you on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me. Chukwemeka,
Awesome.
is how I pronounce your name, right?
Yeah, Chukwemeka, you got it right. Okay, how important is e-learning in today's world?
Well, I think in today's world, post-pandemic or during the pandemic, e-learning has become extremely important in order to have access to education that you can't do if schools are closed, if universities are closed, if workplaces are closed. So it has become hugely relevant globally, not just for Africa, because people have to continue their education, and then the only way to do it is through some form of remote learning, even if it's TV or radio or other methods.
I know you've been there from the early days of e-learning, and up to the pre and the post and during pandemic and even the post. How are Africans accepting the reality of e-learning?
I think now everybody's, I mean, before that, people were excited about it. But of course, you've got to remember one thing is it's all down to access to the internet. So if you don't have, an infrastructure, and if you don't have access to the internet, and if you don't have access to quality internet, and if you don't have access to affordable internet, then you can think it's all wonderful, but you're going to have a problem. So, so if that's there, and of course, underlying all that is access to power. So, but if that's there, I think that it has huge opportunities. Because not just from the perspective of that you have access to the information that you need, you have access to quality teachers. Teachers can teach in a different way. There are all these interesting and fun tools that also will appeal to young people the way they think, and they've changed because they're far more accustomed to an digital environment, and also just-in-time learning. So from that perspective, there are very many advantages. I would never say that it replaces a great teacher in a great classroom who loves the students, who feels their students, but it has so many advantages. And I just think, let's say from us two people, I'm always doing e-learning just by Googling. I'm, doing something, I'm reading something, I Google something, that's e-learning. I Google it in the time when I need it, and I retain that information because I do it contextually. So I'm not just doing it in advance, I'm in a situation, I quickly need to find some information, I Google it, I find it, and I retain that information because it's done within that context that I need it. So that's the simplest form of e-learning.
Rebecca, I'd like you to expand a bit on the challenges. I mean, what are some of the challenges that you think would affect the adoption of e-learning?
Well, the first ones I mentioned just now is infrastructure. So when the pandemic started last year, we did a survey last year. When the pandemic started, a survey with all our Pan-African community, asking them questions about how they can continue education if schools are closed. And many of them received the mandate from government, well, now you have to teach online, but without telling them how, without ensuring there's the access that they need. So the underlying challenge is infrastructure, and is access to the internet, access to power. Then comes access to devices. And of course, with that also comes enabling the people that are involved, enabling and training the teachers, but not just, and so you could, let's say, train the teachers and empower the teachers that they know what they're doing. But if then the school head or a school administrator doesn't think it's important and doesn't really give them the environment they need, it's not going to work. So it's lots of factors that play a role. But of course, the basic factor is access. I mean, if it's access to the internet, if you don't have that. And of course, the cost associated with that. So of course, it's, it's not, I mean, the internet is more expensive in many African countries than it is in Europe. And so these are kind of things that really need to be taken on by government and changed, not only for e-learning, but for e-working. And we've also seen the pandemic has changed the way we work, it's changed the way we do everything. So I think access to affordable, quality access to the internet, access to power are hugely important.
So that brings us to the question of investment. Do you think that adequate investment is going towards this sector?
Not really, no. I think no, it isn't. And when you say the e-learning sector, I mean, in some cases, yes, you've got some great partnerships. So a lot of good initiatives, and there are many good initiatives, are through public-private partnerships. So you might have a partnership with a foundation, together with the government, with a donor country that invests, but it won't be. It'll be maybe for one situation. It won't be for the whole country. It won't be for all the schools, all the universities in the country. But at the same time, things are happening. Universities are changing. Universities are finding their own means of doing it. They're becoming. They also need that they need to turn out graduates that are relevant for the workplace, that will find jobs. So they're also looking at ways of becoming more competitive, of finding the funds, etc. But of course, I think governments could do more. And one of those things is working with the telecommunications corporations to ensure that it's available.
How do you see the way that Francophone Africa is adopting e-learning in comparison to Anglophone Africa? Is there any major difference that you have seen?
It's slower than Anglophone Africa. It's slower, and I think that's mainly due to partnerships. A lot of universities, and especially where does e-learning start? Schools, yes, but the schools don't necessarily have the funding. Schools is then regulated a lot by the government, and so some schools, private schools, don't have an issue. And semi-private schools, and of course, there's a lot of partnerships, for example, with different foundations and donor countries to support schools. But if people driving e-learning, it's often the university are driving, and then it trickles down to other areas. And so it's the Anglophone speaking universities that have had more partnerships with countries like the UK, the US, etc. But it's catching up. It's also because France was quite slow to adopt online learning.
Awesome. So my final question will be around, I mean, for example, I believe that, the future of Africa is, the number of, young people we're able to educate, but I know that the physical classroom wouldn't be able to achieve that, right? So what do you think is a future of e-learning for education in Africa?
Okay, so as a result, the pandemic brought a lot of bad stuff, but it also brought a lot of good stuff. And what it brought is the fact that we have meetings like this. Everybody's adopted Zoom and things is no problem. So as a result, I've done all these virtual events as well. So normally it's an annual one-year event each year, face-to-face, plus different reports. But now we've done a host of virtual events, a host of webinars, which have allowed people from all over the world to participate. We've done academies, and as a result of that, people have seen that online isn't so bad. So in the past, for example, the perception, I think, of employers, the perception of governments, and not just in Africa, and the perception of parents was that an online degree was not the same as a university degree where the student was present. But now with the shift that everybody's actually had to trial and error, people who actually went to university in a formal university had to then switch to online and saw that had advantages. They could learn just as well. Sure, there's certain things missing. You're not out there with young people, but the shift of perception has happened as a result of the pandemic, that online education will be seen as more acceptable. And so there are some initiatives, for example, by some universities abroad. If you want to study abroad, they say, look, the first year you can learn online, and then the second year we'll arrange the visas and you can go, and then you can already have this kind of trial and test to see whether you like the university. Another movement, of course, is also it's not just degrees. I mean, so at the end of the day, what is it about? An education, yes, that's a wonderful luxury. I'm going to study something because I want to enjoy that, to stretch my mind. I want to learn something new, and I have the luxury that I can just study this without it meaning that I have to find a job in this area. But that's not a reality for most people. Most people, it's studying to get a degree, to get a job. And then if you look at all the people who actually have degrees, do they actually find the jobs? They often don't find the jobs because the employers don't think that they have the skills that they need in order to fit into that job, or they're not. So there's a new movement about short degrees, stackable credentials, and there are various players out there. For example, Coursera, I don't know if you've come across them, but they have open online courses which you can book. I can learn anything on there. I can do a law degree on there, but I can also do a degree on digital marketing, a short course. And so this is going to become more of a reality. But it's a question again is, how do governments perceive it and how do employers perceive it? If they see that these courses are equally as valuable as actually doing a 4-year degree in university, where I might have done all my papers but not learned the soft skills, then that's a movement. Then we'll be moving forward in that direction.
Wow, interesting. Look, I mean, this can be a topic on its own, but for now, this is where we've done the cutting. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you very much.
All the best.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.